All right. So it looks like it's working. Um, okay, so first part of you know what, let me share my screen so that we can all see the agenda. All right, is everyone able to see that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So moving on to number 2 here. So we'll watch 2 of the videos together and then 5 minutes of the segment from, in this case, our discussion from a couple weeks ago. And we'll use the TATT rubric from the article to evaluate the discussion. Does anyone have a preference as to which videos we watch, or should we just go with the first 2 that are listed? Either way is good with me.
That seems fine. The first two.
First 2, okay, sounds good. So we'll do
The second one, just a heads up, we can't analyze. So the second one, we would have to watch that and analyze the third one.
Got it. So then that sounds good. So we'll start with literacy and enjoyment 2 then, and then we can move on to the second video and then the third video. I think it's at skip to 4 minutes and 14 seconds if I saw the watch from 4:14. Yeah, okay. And then I think there's a way to share share computer sound so that we should all be able to hear it.
What We Think About Reading by James and Reuben.
At Edmund Waller School, Lewisham, Class 6B are in their second year with the Power of Reading project.
Our favourite books.
Over the last week or so, they've been creating.
Sorry, I don't think that's the video because that's only 30 seconds long. Let me try this again. Literacy enjoyment 2, watch from 4:14 to the end of the video. Okay, literacy enjoyment 2, play.
It looks like it's just giving a sample. I think we have to log in.
What We Think About Reading
okay.
by James and Reuben.
Thanks for catching that. Again. There we go. All right, so 4:14.
Now the class are going to use drama to start exploring a new book together.
There is so much within the book, and in fact, it's a dynamic relationship. They're reading, they discover things, they're inventing, they're being creative as they read, and the drama allows them to physicalise this process.
They're going to listen to chapter 1, then act out some key scenes.
Everything you hear and the ideas and feelings you gain from me reading this are things I'm going to ask you to inform your drama. The first chapter is called Meeting. Yes, said Tom bluntly.
Goodnight, Mr. Tom is set during World War II. Willie's been evacuated and finds the countryside and his host, Mr. Tom, a bit frightening.
The boy was thin and sickly looking, pale with limp sandy hair and dull grey eyes. His name's Willie, said the woman.
It was quite a long chapter and quite challenging in terms of the words used and the sentence structures, and a lot for children to listen to. But the reading aloud part is critical.
He knelt on one of the chairs at the front window and peered out. Graves didn't look scary as she had made out, even though he knew he was surrounded by dead bodies.
The combination of a good teacher and a good book being read aloud is almost irresistible to any children.
Children's graves, probably. He was sitting on Elizabeth Thatcher when he heard voices.
Reading aloud is going to pull children into the book in a way that hardly anything else can.
A loud, sharp barking suddenly disturbed the silence. The squirrel leapt and disappeared. Willie sprang to his feet. A small black and white collie ran around the tree and into the leaves. It stopped in front of him. And there were moments where significant issues which I knew we were going to raise during the drama, I raised those issues to discuss them, just to clarify they understood them, and also in a way to sow the seeds of their understanding so that could flourish when we came back to the drama later. Just go back over that line a moment. Now, just you shut your old mouth, he whispered firmly. There's someone asleep. What do you think's happening to Tom? Yes.
Tom is feeling like he's his child, that he is responsible for him anyway.
Yes, Ruben.
He didn't really know what to expect.
Hold these ideas in your head because we're going to use them soon. Okay, we're going to move straight on to the drama.
Literacy and books are not just something that you have to sit and listen to, but you can do things and you can get up out of your seat and you can act it out and you can use your body and as well as your mind and your voice. All of these ideas and principles were brought forward into the current project.
Good, okay. All the people number 2, you are evacuees. The billeting officer has walked you up the road, you've come to the house. All people on number 1, this side, you are the hosts. The pair work in line was meant to be a very accessible, immediate response. So before getting into the more in-depth analysis and response to the text, I wanted to give them an opportunity to straight away get up and explore or express how they felt those characters would have responded. Then we're going to quickly go down the line and hear each of your statements. 1 minute. It wasn't particularly demanding or exposing for them to do that. It wasn't like I was isolating 2 children and asking them to do it for everybody else. So they were all involved. A very short exercise just to get them up and moving around after they've been sitting down, and then extend the length of the exercises and what you expect them to achieve within that time.
I want a good working boy.
I try and be a good working boy.
I hope you can help me out with the shop.
Don't be afraid of that damn dog. He's only friendly. His name is Cassie.
But he was jumping up and down.
I then split the chapter into 6 areas. Through the drama, we then looked at what they thought happened to Willie before he arrived and what might happen to him afterwards. I'm going to give you an envelope, and in the envelope will be a description of the scene that I want you to explore. We took it through chronological order, really.
Improvisation in the middle. Okay. Improvisation.
So the boys who did the arrival, they put themselves into the roles of the billeting officer and Tom.
The children are making tableaux, or frozen images, of key moments in the chapter, putting themselves physically into the story.
I am the billeting officer.
Billeting officer? Who's this?
Willie.
Willie?
Billeting officer's son.
Your son? Billeting officer's son and? Tom. The graveyard and the dog, when he was left on his own, he went out to the graveyard. He's scared by a squirrel.
Who wants to be the squirrel? Alvin's the dog and I'm the boy.
Just as he's recovering, a dog runs around the corner and starts barking at him, and his mother has told him that dogs will kill him, so there's a very dramatic scene. What was Willie doing at the beginning of the scene?
When they're walking past the graveyard.
So what were you doing at that point? The character who was Willie was quite a lot more confident than Willie himself. It's not loyal to the text, but it's definitely showing that he is having a reaction. He's putting himself in the shoes and empathising with Willie, and this is how he would respond. Where are you going to finish?
The finish is when the dog comes.
And what was Willie doing at that point?
When he gets the stick like that.
So that's your final frozen image. Practice those 2 points. So we had the barking dog, the growling, we had the wind. So they really created the environment and the scene and brought all those different elements in. Who are the rest of you then?
He's the grave that I sit on. He wakes up the next day, he goes downstairs or something, he has breakfast.
And then we concluded by asking them to predict what happens next, which is something you often do with a story at the end of a chapter, but for them to be able to explore that through drama and show that, it gives them a bit more ownership of that next stage and brings it to life. So show me your frozen images. Where's the first one?
Okay.
So number 1, what's this?
Tom's giving Willie his breakfast.
Tom's giving Willie his breakfast, okay? Then the girls decided, quite intuitively I would say, that the next day Willie was going to get bullied. He was a victim.
We're the bullies and we're bullying him.
He's going to get bullied?
Yeah.
He was weak, he was fearful, and that this would be picked up on by the local children who would bully him. And the teacher didn't seem to notice that he was getting bullied. Who are you? Teacher. Shows their understanding of human nature, that great insights, and show that they've really engaged with the ideas of the text and drawn their own conclusions about the next chapter. What you need to think about, girls, is your faces. And the reason I added that last piece on the sort of predictive part was that then when they do read the next chapter and the story does begin to evolve, they've already set down their own understanding or prediction of what will happen. And as the story unfolds, they'll be more interested to find out what the actual story has in store for them. And the title of your piece was? Could you go back to your first? There were fantastic moments in every group's piece. The group that looked at Willie's life before he came to live with Tom decided to dissect the mother's character or personality into 4 parts. And in each of those parts, they expressed different aspects of her character, which was such a sophisticated idea, and they pulled it off very well, I thought. Split the mother into 4 characters so you can show the different things that might have happened to Willie. Fantastic. Okay, so the idea was that although this very dogmatic mother was overbearing and scaring this poor little boy, there was also a side to her character where she was longing for him not to go and didn't want him to go and was holding on to him and fearful of for his safety. So that was a very strong piece. Okay, this is an interesting one. So, what are you doing?
She's just fainted.
She's just fainted. Why have you fainted, mate?
Because she's leaving. I'm a very religious mother and telling her to not forget about Jesus.
Fantastic.
I'm just praying. I don't want her to go, so I'm trying to pull her away.
So fantastic. The next thing with Good Night, Mr. Tom for 6B we'll share reading the story. We will write in role. We'll do maybe some other drama techniques, such as hot seating. We will draw pictures, we will explore the text using a variety of different mediums. So we'll bring the text to life, we'll live through it, we'll talk through it, we'll relate to how the characters respond, elements of those characters that we can see in ourselves.
You get interacted into another world, and it helps you think about what happens to you in real life.
I would say that people that don't read don't really explore.
What we're looking for is for them to empathise with the characters and to live through their lives and come out the other side, which hopefully they'll get if they carry on reading, is come out the other side a richer human being with more knowledge than they ever would do if they just lived their own life and never accessed text.
You should just leave it to the writing, because sometimes the writing actually paints pictures in your head.
If there's like anything like you like to watch on telly and there's like a book of it, read that and see what the difference is.
So I'll switch screens here for a second so that we can, I guess, talk about that video first and then maybe look at the rubric at the same time. Let me just find the article. There we go. Sorry, I'm just trying to split my screen here so I can share it and see the Zoom. Screen. All right. Is everyone able to see the rubric? Okay, sorry that took so long. I was having some technical issues. Do we want to just the directions for the or the agenda said we don't have to formally apply the rubric necessarily, but just use it as a guide. So I guess we can just kind of glance at the criteria on here as we talk about just maybe the general things we were thinking about as we were watching the video and the observations we had. I picked up on a few things, but does anyone want to start first? Or I'm happy to start either or.
Sure. I noticed like the whole activity that they were doing with making these pictures of different parts of the text, they had to be engaged in some type of exploratory talk with each group. We didn't necessarily see any super specific examples of the students' exploratory talk, but it has to have happened for them to be able to work together and kind of co-reason as to why these different sections of the text are important and why they need to show them the way that they're showing them.
I agree with you, Brittany. I also wrote down exploratory talk. For them to literally act out what they're imagining, they have to, in small groups nonetheless, they have to and come to a consensus about what a scene is going to look like. They definitely have to explore like the written word. I also marked down that there was lots of room for effective responses, particularly with that one kid who the guy was like, it's not true to the text, it's not loyal to the text, but it really shows how he would react and blah blah blah. So I thought there was a lot of room for that. And then I just said that there was room for, and I guess that this kind of goes along with the exploratory talk thing, elaborated explanations, because the students like had to sort of explain why they were positioning themselves in certain ways, or like especially with I thought it was really neat what they did with the splitting the one character into 4 different characters. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, sorry. Overall, I felt like the whole experience was very authentic, and very kind of open-ended, open-minded. I feel like we didn't see as much of the like students' discussions, but just the fact that they had to take this scene and kind of act it out, it showed that they were able to kind of put themselves into their character shoes and really understand what was going on.
Yeah, just to echo that, or I feel like an activity like this does engender those types of affective responses because of how the teacher and the students were saying, well, kind of encourages me to think about myself in the character's position. It makes them personally connect with the text. And then as they're collaborating to recreate whatever scene they're assigned, I also thought that kind of shows how they need to reference the text as well, because they think back to the story, they think about the details that they want to recreate from that scene, and then the teacher asks them, okay, so asking them very open-ended questions about why they chose to recreate the scene the way that they did, and kind of just encourages each student to explain what they're doing and what from the text, I guess, informed their decision for how they're positioning themselves, or just what the scene looks like in general. So anything else that we want to mention about that video?
I also feel like the whole freeze frame concept that they were doing is more of like a generalization type analysis part of this rubric, because they're going to have to be able to show that high level thinking in order to form just that one little section of that text to kind of like generalize it. So there's that too. And I also said something about speculation, and the one part where he's like, they need to make this freeze frame of a prediction. So that can kind of go into the speculation component of the rubric as well.
Definitely. Anything else before we move on to the next one? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'll pivot back to the other window. Okay, so this is collaborative reasoning. So we're just going to watch this video as a preview for the example video, which will be the next one.
Jules, VP of a ketchup company.
Here it is. Right. Everyone see that YouTube video?
Mhm.
Okay.
Collaborative reasoning is an approach we've developed to classroom instruction to make a big leap beyond the usual ways of classroom discussion, which are called discussion but are really a question and answer session. Well, collaborative reasoning is intended to promote children's independent, creative, and critical thinking, and to be very personally engaging, which school as usual often is not, especially for children who haven't been very successful in school, or children from disadvantaged minority groups, or boys. So this project has been running for since the early 1990s, but we hit our stride in the late 1990s and now have a string of findings that I think you'll find quite interesting. One is that after participating in as few as 4 of these discussions of 15 or 20 minutes in length, children consistently in now a total of 8 quasi-experiments write reflective essays that contain better developed arguments, that is, arguments scored blind by raters to contain more satisfactory arguments, counter-arguments, rebuttals, uses of text evidence. And we've done these studies here in Central Illinois. Our original paper was Reznitskaya et al., 2001. We've extended these studies to China and Korea. We had a 2008 publication by Dong et al. Called Collaborative Reasoning in China and Korea, where we show comparable results with Chinese children, including children from a small village with parents with low levels of education. Almost none of the parents were high school graduates. Another finding from this research is enhanced motivation and interest. We assess that in several different ways. One is with questionnaires, emotion checklists. We also have adults who don't know what's going on, rate engagement of children in various kinds of classroom activities. They always rate engagement higher during collaborative reasoning discussions. A reference here would be our very recent paper by Zhang, Anderson, and Nguyen Jahil. Nguyen Jahil is the person who just called me on the phone. That's a really interesting study because it involved Spanish-speaking children, some of them immigrants, some of them born in the US, but with limited English language learners. We expected to find that we could give a big boost to the language development of these children, and indeed we did. We were able to show improved reading, writing, listening, and speaking with just 8 sessions of collaborative reasoning. What else can I tell you? We've learned a lot about the social process. We find that good ideas or strategies for arguing introduced by innovative children in a discussion group will spread from child to child and occur with increasing frequency. This phenomenon has been studied by a sociologist, where it's called such things as diffusion. We're investigating it on a micro scale in classrooms, and we use the child-friendly phrase, the snowball phenomenon. So the rolling snowball gets momentum and gains in size. We find that children's discussion participation improves. One reason it improves is that child leaders emerge. The paper about emergent child leadership is by Lee and others, bears a 2007 publication date. I should have given you the original citation for the snowball phenomenon. It's Anderson and others, 2001.
So let's move on to the example.
The thing that's different about a Verbo vacation home, you always have.
Remember our goals. You're
Everyone's still able to see it? Okay.
sitting knee to knee. Get in the circle. Nope, that's good. You're good. You're looking at each other and you're going back to the text for your reasons why. Okay? Here's your question. Which character trait describes Deborah the best?
Strong. Not yet, Emma.
Are you thinking? Emma, you're first.
I think she's brave.
You're not looking at me, you're talking to your friends.
I think she's strong. I would think she's adventurous. Brave. So.
Kiami? Okay,
describe
so
how she is.
now you have to talk about why your answer is the best answer.
I think she's brave because she's dealt with everything that's happened. I think she's strong because she had to give up her family and she had to move to different places because everyone she has been with had died. When you guys get to page 41, I think she's adventurous because she took lead in the army. She didn't back out and she didn't complain when she got thorns and needles all in her hand. She didn't complain. She kept going. When her feet got really sore, she kept going. She didn't complain. She didn't stop going. Does she know? I think she's really brave because she had to give up her family and she had to go all through the tough stuff she had to do. I think she's kind because when she went to what's his name again? Thomas. Yeah. Deacon. No, Deacon. Yeah. Deacon Thomas. Then and he promised her if you can do this choice for 10 years, then I'll give you food, shelter, and clothing. And then, cause she took it. I think she's strong because because it said that she was in the army. She didn't back out, and when she got shot, she just kept holding on. She dug the bullet out, and she didn't dug it out. Actually, she couldn't get it out. She got her pocket knife out, and she got it out. And
Sorry for pausing. I'm just wondering, is anyone else having a hard time hearing the kids, or am I the only? Do we want to? I mean, I know that we just watched the second video, the intro for this already. Do we want to just keep watching this and see what we can take from it, or do we think it would be best to watch a different video where we can hear them more clearly? I'm fine doing either or.
Do we want to try to just like, I mean, I know it says to watch it together, but I feel like we can all individually maybe watch it on our own computers and hear it better, and then come back in like 2 minutes. I don't know if that would be, I don't know if it's just like a Zoom thing why we can't hear it, or
I think it's the video because the teacher's voice is really loud.
okay. Gotcha.
Should we, I mean, I can check out the next link to see if it's a little easier to hear. Or if we, if we want to just keep watching this and take from it what we can do that as well.
I mean, I feel like I can hear them enough to get through the rest of the video.
I'm fine. Yeah, I mean, I just want to be respectful of everyone's time as well, since we've, this is the third video that we're watching. We've got other stuff to get to. So that sounds good.
and she escaped the bandage. Well, she had no choice. It was too painful to do it. She didn't have a choice to do it. She had to. She had nothing else to do.
Do you agree with anyone in this circle? Is there a way you can tell them that you agree?
All of them, actually.
Tell who you agree with and why.
I agree with Kiami the most because she was very strong and she had a bullet in her leg. Yeah, a bullet in her leg, and she dug it out. And she just dug it out, and she didn't complain. I agree with Emma the most because I think she was brave too, because it really, imagine if we all got sent away from Alpan and we moved from house. How would you guys feel? Bad. That's the same mother and father. That's the same thing.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you because I know this is our first conversation and we'll do this again tomorrow. So when we stop, we're going to go around the circle one more time, and maybe you've changed your answer, maybe not. So which character trait describes Deborah the best? Emma, we'll start with you again.
I like angels. I like adventures.
Okay, Brandon?
Still strong. I'm gonna say still.
Just your answer.
Brave.
Jaya?
Strong.
Kiami?
Strong.
How many of you changed your answers? Raise your hand. Great. And how about our goals? Did you look at each other and not at me?
Yes.
You did. Did you sit knee to knee?
Yes.
Did you go back to the story for your support
Yes.
or for your reasons why? You did. You met your goals today, but I'm going to set new ones for you. Because I noticed we were going in a circle, in a circle, in a circle. But in this kind of conversation, you don't have to wait your turn or go in a circle. You can wait until someone's finished talking, and you can add on to what they say, like I agree because, I disagree because, I was wondering what you thought about this, just to help have a conversation. Because when I'm in the car with my family, I don't wait for every person to take their turn talking. We just kind of talk back and forth about things. But this time we're talking about the story and what we think about the story. Okay, so tomorrow when we come back, your goals are going to be to listen to each other a little bit better and go back and forth. So maybe someone was really quiet in our conversation. Could you have said, "What do you think?" and asked them what they thought? So those are our goals for tomorrow, and we'll see how well we do on those. You guys are
My first year teaching, lesson planning was rough. Then I found education.com and realized.
Okay, so stop sharing. Just going to go back to the rubric. All right, so I guess just general notes that I caught from that was, I mean, clearly, like, this was a group of young students who had very little experience with facilitating a conversation like that on their own before. So, you know, the teacher, I feel like, was, you know, guiding them with how to, you know, frame not just their answers to the questions that she was posing and that they were supposed to kind of talk about amongst themselves, but just helping them with framing their responses to each other. You know, do you agree or disagree with that person, and why? So just kind of helping them with, I guess, that etiquette. So that's the one big thing that I kind of picked up on from that.
I really liked how like, I guess we didn't see it, but she gave them like goals for their conversation. And then at the end, she revisited the goals and they were able to like see what they did well on, and then what they can still work on for the next time. I think that will really help improve their conversation. And then kind of related to the rubric, I thought at first, related to like the uptake part, they weren't necessarily building on each other's ideas, but by the end, when the teacher said, do you agree or disagree with your classmates, they were able to start building on each other's ideas.
I feel like it definitely gradually got more and more exploratory, more and more with effective responses, more elaborate throughout. And it was only a 5-minute video, and probably only about watching 3.5, 4 minutes, if that, of their actual conversation. So it's interesting to see like how they can start so basic, and then by the end of like 4 minutes, kind of have a little bit more bounce back and forth.
Yeah, I agree with what you guys said. I kind of like noticed a progression throughout the thing. Is like they started with like these really affective responses, like, oh, I think she's kind because and like elaborated responses as well, but like clearly making like inferences about, like, you know, or like personal connections as to why the character is a certain way. But then there was like one kid like midway through the video, maybe a little closer to the end, who actually like referenced the text. I think she's on straight. She said, or the kid said, I think she's strong because on page blah blah it said, or whatever exactly she phrased it. And from there, I feel like I noticed the conversation kind of take a more sophisticated turn, where I think that they were using uptake when they were like, I agree with blah 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 the most because whatever. And then that the girl at the end, she did that. There was definitely some exploratory talk. She's like, imagine if this happened to you, blah blah blah. And to me, that was like a really authentic question on her part too. Like that was something that potentially would have come up like in a real conversation, not forced in this academic way. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I just think that like a good conversation begets more good conversation, you know. So like as the quality improved, I think it was like almost like a, like the guy was saying, the snowball. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding what you were just saying, Jess, about referencing the text, I think this is kind of more of a simpler note, but I thought it was very helpful that each of the kids had their own copy of the text as they were discussing the story, especially since younger kids might have a more difficult time recalling text evidence. They might need to actually flip back to the literal page where they, you know, read a specific thing. And then, and I guess just going along with that, I think at one point, it was earlier in the video when they were talking about identifying traits of specific characters, the teacher asked them to kind of defend their answer as to why their answer was the best of the group. And if I remember correctly from one of the readings, I think like using text evidence to support your answer, that's a part of that exploratory type of discourse. So, you know, the fact that they had to you know, argue and defend their position was, you know, was neat to see.
Also, I feel like that skill is just so important because it's one of the main skills that's used in TDAs. And unfortunately, like even though it might not be something that we like to have our kids do all the time, like it's a skill that's needed. So if they're able to build it within a collaborative environment and they're able to utilize discourse in order to figure out, well, how can I support my argument a little bit better? They can then apply that to their TDAs and to their papers in the future and all that.
Any other notes before we close out of that? Okay, I'll stop sharing. And then I think next we watch, let me just double check. I think it's our video.
I dropped the link in the chat. I don't know if I can also just pull it up if and screen share.
Yeah, sure. Let me see. I might be able to open it. If not, and you give me the passcode too. So let's see here. Okay, here we go.
In the word, but aging when you're doing a hook, when you're
All right, so for this part, just looking at the agenda here, watch 5 minutes of the, oh, okay, so same questions. We're just watching 5 minutes of the video and then using the rubric to analyze our own discussions. So, all right, let me share my screen.
Is that they included this video with Anita Archer, who she was the one, you know.
Do we want to, this is from the last meeting, do we want to look at this part of our discussion where we're analyzing the other group's PDM, or does anyone have a suggestion for a different point that we should look at, like when we're talking about the reading responses or, you know, some other topic? Or we can just leave it here if we're comfortable with that. So, okay. Just checking.
I remember her from the videos we had watched prior, and I thought her instruction was really, really good. So I really liked this. I thought it was a really nice touch, and I think that it worked really well for their website. Yeah, what are your guys' reactions to it?
I also really liked that they started with the quotes. I feel like it's almost like when you're doing a hook, when you're writing something, it kind of draws you into like, why do I want to actually look at these materials? And then specifically with the video concept that you were talking about, that was something that after looking at this, when we're applying new things to our strategy PDM, that I started looking for more video type resources for like different lessons that show these strategies that we're using that we could possibly use in our materials. So it was helpful to kind of see what other groups did to see how we can also improve ours as well.
I totally agree with that.
And I agreed with everything that you've said so far. I liked the quotes at the beginning, and I liked the video because I thought it was more interactive and engaging. I was looking at the resources. The one resource that I really liked was the which word doesn't belong, because I thought that that's a good way to have them like think more deeply about vocab words instead of just thinking like surface level thoughts.
And something that's cool about the which word doesn't belong, I do that in math too. We have a which one doesn't belong, so it's like the different pictures. So this is like a vocab resource that can be cross-curricular too.
Yeah, only thing I'll add is just regarding the resources. I liked how they emphasized how these are tools that can be used both by the students individually, but also in a collaborative way as well. So if you thought about the concept map, for instance, I think they gave the recommendation that students like work in groups to fill that out, so that, maybe some students, if there it is. So if you think of like some students might think of different synonyms than another student, so they can kind of help each other with building a greater understanding of, whatever that word is. So, I definitely liked how they emphasized, that these can be collaborative activities.
Yeah, I agree with you, Colin. And also to piggyback off of what you said, Brittany, like, this one, like, and I'm sure you probably see this in math, like this totally opens up the floor for discussion about the words, which is really cool. I loved the taboo game too. Like, I totally want to do this with my students. This seems like it would be really, really engaging and really fun. Yeah. One critique that I felt like I had was in their lesson plan. I think they do a great job explaining the word, but one of the things that Beck talked about in bringing words to life was like, when we're teaching vocabulary, like we want to really build a strong foundation of the word, like, and we don't necessarily want to teach all the nuances until it's really like ingrained. And for the word weary here, they kind of teach it kind of duplicitously, like they talk about it being tired or bored, right? Like, so I mean, I guess I'm kind of like splitting hairs here, but like if I were to do this, I would focus more on tired and not so much on bored, just because one, that's like more relevant to the text. And that was one of the recommendations, was like, don't get into the weeds with the nuances of a word at first.
Jess, can you provide a student-friendly definition of duplicitously? I'm thinking and building and I'm stuck.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So there's, like more than one meaning, two meanings. They're putting two meanings out in front of you. So meaning very tired or very bored, so you're, yeah.
Duplicating.
It's like a nuance there, right? Like, being exhausted, whatever. But yeah.
I got you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good point. Just, making sure that the definition is, specific and, like you said, relates to the context of the story, and also, as simple as concise and as simple as it can be. So that especially for younger students, like this is a second grade lesson, so that it's easier to grasp. Okay, that was roughly 5 minutes. So I'll stop sharing. Back to the rubric.
Guys, we're blooming.
So just some of the things that I caught on that were, we have an abundance of experience with small group discussions. So, we were able to pretty easily, build on each other's responses and demonstrate that uptake feature. And we were able to cite specific details within each other's responses as we were, adding to them on our own. Making personal connections throughout the discussion, like Brittany, you mentioned when we were talking about the resource, which word doesn't belong, you made that connection to how it applies to you as a math teacher, or how it could apply to you with, what you do as a math teacher. And then just referencing the text as well, Jess, you were talking about how the word weary, like how a more concrete definition could have been provided, since the words tired and bored were both used, and how that might create some confusion with students. And then the only other thing that I thought was interesting was we at some points asked each other questions to kind of clarify responses, just to encourage everyone to elaborate more on their thinking. So those are the big points that I took out of that.
I also said, and I don't know if this would count, so maybe you guys can weigh in on this, but I said intertextual responses, like, because I thought with Britt, like, you made the connection to like your math curriculum. So I was thinking like, maybe that's like an example of like you making a connection to, it's not a text per se, but like it's definitely something beyond the scope of like what we were, you're making a connection to something outside of it.
Absolutely. And in the article from that week, in the intertextual response like description, it also talks about other literary and non-literary works, including works of art, media, billboards, television, or magazines. So what I use with which one doesn't belong is a media. So connecting the two different medias from that website to the website that I use would definitely be an intertextual response.
I just feel like our conversations all the time are very just authentic, and we're able to have like a good discussion, and it kind of flows together, and we're easily able to add on to each other's thinking, ask questions, things like you've said before. And I really like how we can take our own experience in our classrooms and kind of connect it to what we've seen and how we use it, and like some new ways we could use different things.
Definitely. Any other notes about that video? Okay, I'll stop sharing. Okay, moving on to the next part of our agenda. So we took care of number 2. We watched two of the example videos they gave us. We watched our video. All right, so moving on to number 3, we're just discussing our responses from reading response 6 and 7. So starting with reading response number 6, here I'll share my screen so we can see the question.
Didn't we discuss 6 last week?
I thought we did too.
Yeah. So we might not have too much new to say about it. It's a little bit of a different question from the questions last week, but I think we'll probably spend the bulk of our number 3 on reading response 7. But yeah, I guess if we take a brief moment to reflect on the strategy lesson, maybe we can just kind of like sum up what we thought about it, and then note if we agreed on anything or disagreed on anything.
Okay.
Just pulling up I'm gonna be honest, my memory is a little fuzzy from reading response 6, so I'm gonna pull up my notes.
7, I think. Yes.
I think so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, what I thought was good about the strategy lesson, and I know we, kind of discussed this last week as well, was that I feel like the gradual release of responsibility was very apparent in that lesson. Stephanie Harvey did a really nice job of one, explaining the purpose for, why they're doing what they're doing, why it's important to annotate text and leave tracks of your thinking so that you can, monitor your understanding of the text. She modeled it very clearly for the students. She thought out loud and made sure that, every specific thing that she was doing, she was giving a verbal explanation for it. And then she, guided the students with practicing it through, the turn-in talks or the whole group discussions that they were doing when kids were sharing out their responses, writing on their own Post-it notes on their clipboards. And then eventually at the very end of the lesson, they moved into more independent practice where they were working in small groups and kind of just facilitating those discussions on their own with less teacher guidance. So I thought that it seemed like she flowed very nicely from, one stage of that gradual release of responsibility to the next.
I agree with you. I think that you hit the nail on the head.
And if I'm remembering correctly from our discussion last week or the last one, I don't think we had any specific like disagreements on anything. I think we pretty much agreed to all of the response. We had very, very similar responses, just written differently.
Yeah. I think this week's question just said, did they know the strategies and improve their comprehension? And kind of like you just said, Brittany, we agreed that they all knew the strategies and the strategies all helped them kind of improve their comprehension.
Which is going to be interesting when we talk about this week's, how strategy instruction isn't necessarily the bee's knees.
So that's it. Should we just move on to reading response 7 in that case? Yep, just going right into it. Yeah, it was reading that study was interesting because I feel like a few of us mentioned this in our responses. Like we have kind of been trained to think that strategy instruction is, well, like it is important, but we've been trained to maybe prioritize it above other things, when, teaching reading skills and comprehension to kids. And something that I think a lot of us mentioned that was really, I think, well said was we can equip the students with these different reading comprehension strategies, but it's not the end all be all. And once we equip them with these strategies, they can kind of pick and choose which ones will help them the best with understanding the text, because understanding the text is the end game. And it just kind of, the one thing it made me remember was growing up as I was, just to use a math example, I remember learning about different ways to solve a specific math problem. Like maybe if it's, I don't know, take multiplication, for instance. And Brittany, if I butcher this,
fine.
But there's a traditional way of doing multiplication, like you just the vertical method. And then I think I remember lattice multiplication. And then, younger kids, they remember you can use like illustrations if the problems are basic enough. So, you're teaching them all these different strategies to solve the same type of problem. But the point of it isn't to make sure that they know of 5 or 6 different ways to do multiplication. The point of it is to ultimately give them, help them feel comfortable with them and choose which one's going to help them, best get the answer. So, I don't know, it's just something I kind of thought of as I was, reading that study.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up because that's something like I will forever, like the Common Core is always like this big issue. It's been a big topic of discussion in my family. And Common Core is basically like with math, and what everybody talks about is how they're giving these kids so many different ways to do the same problem. It's not the same way that I did it, blah, 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 blah. And it's celebrated in language arts to give kids all these different ways, but it's not in math. So that was my little tangent, but it's just interesting and weird that like it can be celebrated in one, but not the other.
It's a double standard.
A little bit. People just don't like math. I get it. But
kind of to go off what you were saying, Colin, how the strategies are important, but it's not the end of the end goal of instruction. I jotted down just how it's important to teach the strategies, but also then to show them how they can pick and choose to use the strategies in order to help them understand the text. And I think that certain strategies can also engage students more. Like if they're making connections, it might help them engage and interact with the text more. And it can also lead to deeper discussions if they kind of have the strategies. They can use maybe a sentence stem to get them started. So I think, like the text said, they are important, but it's not the end goal. So I think they're just kind of things that you can use to increase engagement and increase student discussion, especially for younger kids.
I agree with that. I feel like they're a vehicle and they're a tool, and they need to be, I do think they have inherent value. There's certain things that I annotated texts religiously. There's certain strategies that I use in my day-to-day life that I know for a fact improve my comprehension, especially of dense academic texts that I otherwise would not. If I just read it and did nothing with it, I wouldn't retain any of it. So I know that there is some, just anecdotally, I know that there is some inherent value to teaching strategies like
Comprehension.
oops. So I just know that there is some inherent value, but again, like I think that the end goal there is to have it be a vehicle and have it be something that allows students to really engage in dialogue about a text more robustly and more meaningfully. Because I really do believe, like, you know, that's like kind of really aligned with my philosophy, is like that kids talking to each other, especially in ELA, about literature, like really does make them understand this stuff better.
Yeah, I agree that if students know how to use those strategies, it can, I think, Jess, in your words, I was trying to take a couple notes on the responses. I think you said they ignite dialogue and discussion about a text, which kind of helps with that comprehension in general. So it can really be like the starting point. And then Amanda, you mentioned your sentence stems, which I thought was, especially for, you know, younger readers, can be a really helpful tool. I also just liked how you mentioned one strategy that I guess I wasn't really able to put a label to until now. You called it accountable talk, which is just helping them with figuring out what it means to respond constructively to their peers, and, you know, in a polite, respectful, and, you know, productive way. So you know, those types of strategies can definitely help, you know, not just ignite that discussion, but, you know, keep it alive so that they can, you know, help each other with understanding the text. Anything else we want to say about reading response 7? All right, let's keep going. So, all right, so number 4, we're viewing the other group's PDM, and then we're discussing what we found helpful within it, what we might use in our own classroom, examining the lesson plan, thinking about best practices that we do and don't see reflected in the plan. And then I can do this after the lesson, but I'll take notes as we're talking, and then we'll post our you know, feedback onto the discussion board. So that said, I'll pull up their website and we can look at it together. Okay. So comprehension. I'm just pulling up my notes from this real quickly. Does anyone want to start off with, I guess, just general thoughts they had about the website, things they liked, or things that you know, they would build on?
I can start. So I said that I liked in their intro, like how they really made a point to delineate between like skilled and struggling readers. And then they made an emphasis on like how like these need to be taught explicitly. We can't just expect kids to know them. And I thought those were kind of like subtle. They're like subtleties, but they're like important subtleties. So I like that they like really brought them to the forefront. And then for their lesson plan, I just thought that visualization seemed like a really fun, engaging way to conduct a lesson like this with that poem. Like I've definitely had students make comic strips of like stories in the past, and it's always a fun time. Like they always enjoy it. And honestly, I didn't even realize that what I was doing was this comprehension strategy of visualization, but lo and behold, you know. And then for the resources, I really like their graphical organizers. I thought they gave some really good ones. Those are definitely ones that I use ones like those all the time in my classroom. So
I really like the I learned, I wonder, wow. I haven't seen that before, and it gives students like the opportunity to not only explain what they learned, but also to make those connections, those questions that they have, and just things that are overall interesting to them. So I'll be using that for sure.
I also mentioned like their graphic organizers were a really good way for students to kind of track their thinking as they're reading and like visually see their thinking. I also liked the Mr. H video that they had posted as one of the resources, just because it's an interesting kind of engaging way to teach the comprehension strategies, especially for younger kids that I feel like might not be able to kind of visualize what's going on. And then the one thing in the lesson that I really liked was like the last part of the lesson where they had to have the students reflect on what they learned, and they decided to do like a video reflection. So I thought that was more of an interesting and engaging way for students to reflect on how they used the strategy, how the strategy helped them, as to opposed to like the normal like journal entry or exit card, like index card exit ticket thing. I thought that was just more kind of interactive and engaging, and maybe students would get more out of it that way.
I think they're better able to explain their thinking sometimes too through video.
Mhm. And I don't know what's it called. There's like we used it during like COVID, Flipgrid, where then they could be able to like watch each other's responses, which I think they would benefit from as well.
Absolutely. I was trying to think of that the whole time too, as you were talking about it. Like, what's that called?
Yeah, we have our 7th graders, when they read memoirs earlier in the year, they'll do video journal reflections with Flipgrid, and they really enjoy them for all the reasons we were just saying. They're it's a very engaging reflection activity. I guess they kind of also feel like not necessarily in a bad way, but they feel maybe a little more like on the spot since they're recording themselves. So they feel like maybe they take the preparation for that a little more seriously. I know that they write out their answers and review them before they actually start recording. And then they have the opportunity to, I think on Flipgrid, you can like comment or respond on each other's videos. So, you can kind of keep that dialogue alive just through a different medium, online. So it's kind of neat. What was I gonna say? I think the only other thing that a lot of you just kind of hit on the notes that I took. The one thing that I guess I would just add was about Mr. H's learning resources, that video where he's talking about the text connections. I just appreciated how he differentiated between text to self, text to world, text to text, and gave really clear examples using The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, just because like students, they might make those connections all of the time as they're reading and not even realize it. So like if you teach them those 3 types explicitly, they can start to label them and say to themselves, maybe more naturally, like, oh, I just made a text to text connection, or that was more of a text to world connection. So I just thought that was helpful information for teachers to know. Anything else we want to say about the PDM? Okay, I'll stop sharing again. So I'll after the video is over, or the recording that is, I'll just type out a summary of what we talked about and then post that to the to D2L. Okay, find my agenda. I'm sorry, I have like 50 tabs open right now because of all the bouncing around I've been doing. Okay, so that was number 4. Okay, so number 5, it says look ahead at the dialogic professional development materials assignment due on 4/16. Anything we should be doing right now for the assignment. So I'll just open that up real quickly and we can talk about it. I was looking at yesterday, it seems very, other than it being focused on a different topic, it seems very similar to the structure we've been doing for the other parts of our PDM. So let's see here. So for the lesson plan, there's a specific template and an example that's provided. Looks like the same criteria for the curated materials as well. And then I know I thought there was a directions for the introduction somewhere, but
Is
yeah.
it right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So do we have, in terms of how we tackle this, Do we want to just keep it as we've been doing it with like how we've kind of delegated the work for the previous two? Or is there anything that we want to change around?
I'm fine doing the same thing.
Same.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, me too. So, that said, since actually, I guess before we maybe talk about when we want to try to have, like a quote unquote rough draft of this done, do we feel like we have any questions about the expectations for this or what to do? Like I said, it seems like the directions, other than it being for a different topic, are very similar to the previous two. So, I feel like I have an understanding of, what to do, but do we think we need to clarify anything before we close out of that? Okay. That said, I think, what did we say? 4/16 is when it's due. So, that is, let me just,
Next Sunday.
okay. Do we want to have, maybe similar to what we did for this last page where we have everything posted by this Saturday beforehand so that we have time to look at it, make any changes, and then gives us the weekend to work on the reflections?
Perfect.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. So that'll be the game plan. So that's that. Number 6, do we have any questions about the topics or readings or assignments from this week that maybe we didn't cover in the previous discussion items? Okay, yeah, I think we were pretty thorough. So, and then lastly, just reflecting on the week's meeting, how did it go? What can make it go more smoothly in the future? Does dialogue feel authentic or forced? How might you make it feel more authentic? What are we learning from each other? How does talking about the readings and your work around the readings enhance your understanding? And what are implications for this for your own work with students? So I guess the one thing I would say about this is, this week's readings have me thinking about aspects of class discussion and dialogue that I never really thought about before. It's just like some of it was familiar to me as I was reading, because I'm like thinking to myself, oh, thankfully I do kind of already practice this a little bit in my own class. I just never really thought about the specific benefits of it as much. I just kind of it became part of my own practice because I saw other teachers doing it in their classes, when I was like student teacher, or when I was a less experienced teacher. So it was just, I guess, it was nice to have the readings kind of reaffirm some of the things that I've already been taught to do, and just to understand those benefits with a little more depth, I guess.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and kind of going off like this week was more focused on discussion dialogue. Looking at the rubric, when we looked at our own discussions, we do a good job hitting like the blooming, as you said, Brittany. I think something we could do for like kind of our own classroom is take that rubric and kind of make it more student friendly so they can start to look at what a good conversation discussion looks like. So maybe they can deepen their discussions, maybe.
I like that. I think that's a good idea, Amanda. It's like I really like do believe in like dialogue as like, a really important way for people to learn. But like one of the struggles that I come across in this is like it's really hard to do in a classroom, and like a lot of it comes down to kids not knowing how to talk to each other like adults. Like we're all adults, we can have these grown-up conversations in like a really nice controlled way, but then kids don't necessarily have those skills yet. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I love that, of making a more student friendly, because the rubric is definitely helpful as we were looking at it on our own to, look at the videos from earlier. And But you know, especially for younger students, you would need to simplify that, and that would be definitely a helpful tool for them to just self-assess. So
I'm wondering, would that possibly be a good material for us to add to our dialogic PDM?
I think so. Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
that.
And I'm wondering if, since we're all kind of focused on those middle grades with when it comes to developing the lesson plan and the materials, yeah, maybe one of those materials could be a middle grades version of what that rubric looks like if we created that on our own and, you know, used our own language. So yeah, totally.
In the lesson, like we could specify, like, you know, because obviously it's a fictional lesson, but like maybe we could specify like, oh, kids have been taught talk moves and they know how to use the rubric or something. I don't know. Like maybe,
Students will reference rubric
yeah.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good idea though. Definitely.
Just write that down. Cool. Anything else from question number 7 that we want to hit on?
I don't think so.
And I think that's, yep, just emailing it. So I'll stop sharing and I will stop recording.